Hi everyone, it's Quickie Baby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm not playing the Scorpion, and that is the Scorpion with the K, the tier 8 German tank destroyer that is probably one of the most played premium tanks in the game. No, I'm dropping down a tier and I'm playing the American tier 7 M56 Scorpion with a C rather than a K. And while this vehicle, maybe it doesn't have quite as big of a gun as its German competition at tier 8, at least for its namesake, it still has a bit of a sting in its tail. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll have to leave after that one. So, the M56 Scorpion, definitely not as popular as having, you know, your classic tier 8 premium. Tier 7 premiums in World of Tanks always seem to be a little bit irrelevant in my opinion, unless they're crazy overpowered, like an E25 for example. And that is because they just don't make as many credits as your tier 8 premiums do. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider purchasing one or even playing it if you don't feel so comfortable to play premium tanks at higher tier. They still make reasonable credits unless you start dumping gold rounds left, right and center, and the gameplay can be a lot more comfortable for players at tier 7 than at tier 8, where you're going to have to start meeting tier 9 and tier 10 tanks, which are really scary. Luckily for the Scorpion inside this matchup, I've got myself into a pretty nice round here. We've got some top tier tanks, of course, and some tier 6s as well. I kind of like this, this two-tier spread matchups, where like it's half of one tier and half of the other. For a vehicle like this, it feels very comfortable, because really the Scorpion isn't the kind of tank that wants to deal a big amount of damage with a single shot. That's because it can't do a big amount of damage with a single shot. This 90mm doesn't have the best DPM, but it has horrendous alpha damage of 240 for a tank destroyer, when other vehicles like Jagdpanthers or even the SU-152 are packing 320 or up to 700 alpha damage if they're penetrating their heat shells respectively. And so the Scorpion gets into this real weird scenario where it's got a nice flexible gun which can aim 30 degrees to the left and 30 degrees to the right, which can kind of make it able to pull off an ambush or even to work a ridgeline with its decent gun depression. But oh dear, something that it can't really do is avoid getting one-shot by a KV-2. Oh my word, ladies and gents. That was an amazing moment. Yeah, I'm just going to have to rewind this and show you how close it was to absolute horrific destruction against the enemy KV-2 there. Because that's really the last tank that you want to have coming around a corner when you've only got 1mm of armor. But just take a look. I don't think this video would have probably ended up being featured on my YouTube channel if we hadn't made the jump and ended up literally jumping over the KV-2's shell there using the ramp. If that is not an all-American action hero moment, I don't really know what is. I escaped by the skin of my teeth, and sometimes I think that the skin of my teeth might be actually thicker than the armor on this vehicle at 1mm, and I was having a bit of a giggle at the time. But of course, why don't we get rid of the KV-2 first before we have a little bit of a giggle? And you'll see that I just stop. I think I take my hands off the keyboard, go, okay, yeah, that just happened. But we've got a second chance in this game, so to say, and hopefully we're going to be able to do something good with it. Well, I probably would be, otherwise I wouldn't be featuring it on the YouTube channel, right? So the Scorpion, flexible gun, doesn't hit hard, doesn't hit all that often, doesn't have outrageous DPM like something along the lines of an E25, and I think that's why a lot of people just don't end up playing this thing. However, it does have pretty okay fast speed backwards. It can go at 17, and 45 forwards is not too bad. Equipment-wise on this tank, I'd recommend that if you have a really, really good crew and a premium consumable, I'm talking about recon and situational awareness across your crew skills, then you could probably get away with coated optics. But for the vast majority of players, you're going to want to use binoculars on this thing. And because you do have that nice wide gun arc, you can afford to keep your binoculars set up and keep them activated while you're engaging around. Now, I'm kind of split as to what the third piece of equipment that I would add to a gun rammer on this tank would be. Part of me wants to use a turbo, because if you use a turbo, you can take a rather slowish, at least top speed limit on this vehicle of 45 up to a healthy amount. And this vehicle's actually got a really good power to weight ratio of just under 30, which means that it is very limited by that top speed limit and not by the grunt inside the engine. And so a turbo might allow you to at least be reasonably fast, not get caught by quite so many medium tanks. You're definitely still going to get caught by light tanks on this vehicle, irrelevant of whether you use a turbo or not. But a lot of players might instead want to use a rotation device on this vehicle to improve the gun handling and allow you to turn the gun through its wide gun arc. So in this kind of a situation, I really just didn't feel very comfortable on this ridgeline anymore. There's an FV304 on the enemy team who has already managed to pick up 3 kills, and there's a Chi-Ri who's starting to hound that ridgeline, and I just don't feel like I can hold back that whole big glut of medium tanks. And trust me, your 554 hit points on this tank won't go very far when every single shell in the game will be able to overmatch your 1mm of armor. And also, if you get into close quarters combat, funny things happen with this vehicle. The way that ramming damage is calculated in World of Tanks is based on the speed that a tank is going, the weight of the tank that's creating the impact, the weight of the tank that's receiving the impact, and also on the thickness of the armor. Generally, faster, bigger tanks do more damage to lighter, thinly armored stationary vehicles. That's all you really have to know. And the Scorpion with 1mm of armor really doesn't take your rams very well, which is why you really need to try and do everything that you can to control the engagement, and why I am taking a turbo on this vehicle rather than the rotation device. Alright, so the enemies seem to be plowing in across this eastern part of the map. I've got a full concealment crew on this vehicle, which will end up with me having at least about 30% concealment on the tank, so I can stay hidden here against the Panther, although I've got to try and get far enough behind these bushes so that they go opaque to know that my muzzle flash will be hidden when I fire. But in this kind of a situation, I feel like I just got to fire anyway, and you'll see that I thought that I was going to get spotted, so I go behind the building, see that my sixth sense didn't go off, and so I've got another chance to hopefully be able to pick apart this tier 7 German medium. This game's still fairly scary. The enemy have 50% more hit points than us, and they're up by 3 tanks. But with shots like that, maybe we can manage to get our team back into this one. The M4A1 falls to the P43 Bis, and suddenly a 3-tank disadvantage is now down to equal terms, with the T43 also picking up their kill on the Challenger. And with the enemy's numbers being thinned, I feel more comfortable now to make a more aggressive play towards the remaining medium tanks on this high ground. And I was even thinking at the time that maybe my town were going to be able to win the town, and this would be a nice, easy, comfortable win. But unfortunately for us, the Chi-Ri is going to advance across, and we'll see that the Tiger actually leaves the town to be able to come and fight this eastern front. We unfortunately miss our first shell on the Chi-Ri. I'm unhappy about that. I didn't really take into account how poor the shell velocity was on these standard rounds at 914. And believe it or not, the high explosive anti-tank rounds, 1,219. So you should actually snipe with heat on this vehicle. Bit of a weird one. Maybe we'll make more use of that later on in the battle. Alright, so the Tiger and the Chi-Ri managed to shut down some vehicles, but luckily the Panther returns on the Chi-Ri, and now we've got a full health Tiger that we're going to have to be chipping away against. And yeah, the hits from this tank, while they're not going to be like your stereotypical tier 8 TD, they definitely do add up. And the accuracy at .33 is not all that bad either. So in this kind of a situation, I've just got to make sure I pull back behind the bush until it is opaque, and then I can shoot through. This Tiger clearly knows where we are, and they're going to blind fire at us, but that's not going to stop us from being able to get another couple of shells. And that Tiger, after those 4 shells, is definitely not looking nearly so healthy. And in this kind of a situation, it's where it's so nice to have these flexible, sneaky tank destroyers that have the luxury of turrets, as close to a medium tank as you can get. Although I would also argue that this gun, it's not really that much better than something on a T20. So apart from the penetration, I guess, yeah, I think that's why this vehicle just doesn't really perform too well, or many people have ended up purchasing it. So I make a bit of a misplay there. I thought that the Tiger was going to sit there, and I was worried about getting flanked by the Cromwell. So I didn't actually sit there for quite long enough to be able to get a shot on the Tiger. But in this kind of a situation where you're now 2 versus 4 and they've got 700 more hit points than your team has, I feel like it's also about making sure that you don't get flanked. And we got a clean kill there on the Cromwell, fully aimed, maintaining all of my HP, and I'm feeling pretty chuffed about that. So I'm going to load a high explosive round on this tank. They're pretty bad, 45mm of pen and 320 alpha damage, but hopefully that should be enough for us to still be able to take out Mr. Wiggly on the enemy team, who is playing the FV304. And I'm not sure if they are in a platoon at the start of the battle, probably not, considering we don't have a platoon on our team. But considering that the T150 and the FV304 are now up to 9 kills between them, those bottom tier tanks are in contention for a Brothers in Arms medal. But lo and behold, it's Quacky Baby in a 1 versus 4 situation wanting to deny the Brothers-in-Arms medal to the enemy team. So I'm going to shoot here at the Tiger, and my shell either hits a fence or it just whiffs. Disaster. Now, one enemy tank is managing to cap, and I low roll on the Tiger. I do not have time for this. So in this situation, I decide instead of shooting at the Tiger who's going to go behind the fences and I had a heat round loaded that I'd take the clean shot on the VK. Now that he's no longer behind the fences, I can finish off the Tiger. But in addition to the T-150 in the cap circle, clearly the FV-304 has also joined, and now Mr. Wiggly has joined Sergeant Knispel with their 9 kills between them to try and end this game prematurely. I would usually love to sit there and farm that VK-301, but I do not have time for that. So instead, even though I'm spotted, let the chips fall where they may. We've got 10 seconds to try and handle this Brothers-in-Arms platoon in the cap circle, and if I get killed, I get killed. Luckily, the artillery misses. The T-150 doesn't react quick enough. We shut down the T-150, turn our attention now towards the VK as we've managed to get a little bit of respite. I repair my fuel tank in between my shots because maybe my tank will be losing all of its hit point. Well, it could get set on fire with the subsequent shot, and I lose 2 crew members to the next shell from the VK-301D, and I decide to get my gunner back into action. Unfortunately, my loader is now out for the next 77 seconds, and with the FV-304, Mr. Wiggly in the cap circle, I'm not going to have time to be able to get my loader back, which will make this next engagement all the more challenging. So I think maybe I've got enough time to be able to flank out. I also thought that maybe the FV-304 would come after me, or maybe even leave the cap circle, but no, they just want to sit there. And once again, with less than 10 seconds left on the cap, we're going to make our way in, hopefully get into this bush without getting spotted. And oh dear, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. To the second, we interrupt the FV-304 there. I'm pulling back, trying to make some dodging plays, decide to go forwards, and oh, here we go, Mr. Wiggly. Not your day, son. And 4 kills won't become 5. We execute both of the enemy tanks inside the cap circle, interrupting twice, pretty much with a couple of seconds left on the game. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, while this vehicle clearly isn't your tier 8 German tank destroyer with that big boy Alpha that hits like a truck, with a little bit of sneaky plays, the M56 Scorpion showed its opponents its worth in this battle. And look, well, this was definitely a fortunate situation for the vehicle, and I was able to use the bushes, I was able to use the close quarters kind of combat, the flexibility of the vehicle to be able to handle the situation. Would I really recommend you all to jump out and be able to pick up this tank at the next opportunity? No, certainly not. There's a reason why it is packing a 49% win rate, and there's only 2 other tank destroyers, premium ones at tier 7 in the game, that have a lower win rate than this, and only just a bit. And that's the Super Hellcat, which everyone has access to as it was one of the reward vehicles, and the Kruppstadt Waffenträger, which might as well almost not exist in the game with how little it's played. And you'd be an absolute raving loon to want to play this one instead of playing something more traditional like an SU-122-44, an E-25, or even having crazy armor like the AT-15A. So, the M56 Scorpion, a vehicle that I have not featured on my YouTube channel in 7 years since it was first released. It's not really my kind of tank that I would want to take out. Its DPM is too low, its alpha damage is too low, and unless you get into situations like this where you get to continuously fire and use the bushes to be able to outplay your opponents, this thing always ends up feeling just a little bit disappointing. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this different kind of video today. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know if you are one of the M56 Scorpion lovers out there who play this thing all the time. If that's the case, why is it the case? Or do you have one of these things in the garage gathering dust and you're not playing it at all? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.